in no more than 2.5 hours. Regroup at rally point 427 and jump as a group. I don't want any stragglers. We do this right, and everyone gets some well-deserved surely. Parting to attend to their own fleet, the commander left the admiral alone at her command display. This may not have been a battle with clashing blades which bards sing might songs of, but to the people that she saved it was a mighty victory, though she certainly did feel for these people, and would have normally been happy to extend her reasonable services to most anyone for the right price. This was different. The Kayamayak, though fairly well known and liked among the GCC, were not especially wealthy, nor did they carry the favor that was usually needed to get a fleet like hers to show up somewhere. If it wasn't for her bullheaded Anishinaabe partner, the partner many of her sisters had often tried to deride her for keeping, she wouldn't even be here at all. But now that she was glad to have saved so many innocent lives, even if there wasn't any profit to be made. Ew. The hiss of air filling a vacuum was immediately audible inside of Sarah's helmet as that Mick's more serious tone popped into the earpiece in her helmet. If ya didn't, I'll even let you sit in the co-pilot's seat while we make history. What the fuck are ya on about now, huh? Seeing the green lights around the airlock door switch from yellow to green, she flicked the latches on her helmet and pulled it off her head. Her previously compacted red mane of curls unfurled itself in strange directions as it escaped from the confines of the helmet into zero gravity. Without any sort of weight hindering it, the mass of red hair had become an amorphous blob. She tried to shake out the mess to tame it, which only resulted in an even more disjointed shape. As she clips her helmet into its harness on her thigh, she grabs onto the netting that covers all four walls of the airlock to steady and orient herself properly towards the door. Right when she gets her bearings, the door begins to slide open, and she is greeted by a plethora of odors, some pleasant and some skunky, as the door finally swung open to reveal the interior of a rather sparse docking and airlock. The middle of the path forward, and just over a meter from the door. His large magnetic boots anchored him to the floor, and the bulky, weighted Martian standard red clothing did much to hide his wide frame. In his mouth sat a tobacco rolled around something far smellier. Between the hand-rolled stoge in his mouth, the massive revolver in a low hip holster, and the thin lines of black carbon fiber weaved around his left eye. It was obvious that he was going for a specific aesthetic. Sarah even thought he looked quite a bit more rugged now with those scars and that full beard, with his hands resting on his hips just so. Even if one was dangerously close to a hand cannon, he definitely had a certain presence she wasn't expecting. For just a moment, she almost felt the same way she did 8 years ago. However, before she could continue that thought, Mick finally spoke up. "All right," I scanned. "Yeah, and it don't look like you're trying nothing, so I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. I'll tell ya exactly what's going on once we're on the bridge and strapped in. I already set in the sequence into the computer, so we got about..." Mick's left eye slightly twitches, and he glances off for a second, about 6-7 minutes. "Throw on them boots and follow me." Mick's left arm made a slight mechanical sound as he used it to point towards a pair of magnetic boots attached to the wall next to the door. "Yeah. No smoking on a station is illegal, right? Especially that shit you're fucking humming over there." Sarah spoke as she reoriented herself and pushed towards where the boots were mounted. Even though she was at his mercy, she couldn't help but make the obvious quip in the situation. Fuck the police! Sic semper tyrannis. Mick took a long drag and slowly let out the smoke. We're free out here, remember? Out here, especially when you're by your lonesome like I've been for the past 6 months. The only living being that can hold you to account is you. It's important to reflect on that idea because it applies everywhere, even the densest, most populated cities. Is that really what you're doing out here? Just getting high, building weird shit, and philosophizing? Sarah retorted. Yup. Mick responded with a hearty chuckle. Well, that and... He trails off as he takes another drag of his stogie. After allowing the trail of smoke lingering in air for just a moment, he continued, It's surprisingly freeing not to have to worry about blowing up a whole bunch of people just because I want to play with vacuum energy. You fucking what? Sarah had been in the middle of cinching up her boots when that last statement made her pause and look over at Mick with a look of shock and fear. Now she really thought floating out endlessly into the void might be better than this. At least there might be a chance of rescue. Mick, picking up on this distress, only widened his smirk. I said I'm not going to tell ya till we're strapped in. His gaze slightly shifting away from Sarah for a split second. We only got a couple minutes. Hurry your ass up. The shift in his tone on that last bit very much told Sarah that whatever was happening, she really should be strapped in for it. Cinching the last strap as tight as she could, she pulled the boots away from the wall, deactivating the magnets, and reoriented herself to step through the airlock door. The clanging of magnetic boots locking onto a metallic floor filled the small space for a moment as Sarah swung herself into the room part intersection and magnetized to the floor. Mick took a step back to give her some extra room, then another, while motioning towards the path leading to the dock shuttle, acting as a bridge. Ladies first, he said with a pleasant but obviously sarcastic tone. Oh my, ever the gentleman, returning the sentiment with her own sarcasm, and eye-rolling. Even though Sarah was trained in martial arts and more than capable of beating a man much bigger than her in a fight, Mick was a big guy who had every right to want her dead. Regardless of her capabilities and how pleasant Mick had seemed so far, she was still concerned. The anxiety wasn't eased as he was almost breathing down her neck while they walked through the dockport, then through the cargo passenger bay of the shuttle, and finally into the cockpit. Traitor! A sharp squawk called out, before Sarah even had a chance to fully take in the sight of the haphazardly arranged instruments, readouts, monitors, and control panel. Her attention was immediately pulled towards one of the 4 seats in the cockpit, which was currently occupied by a small, well-padded cage containing a rather angry African gray parrot. I thought you said you were alone. Bitey, I missed you? Momentarily startled by the shockingly loud scream, recognition flashed in Sarah's eyes. As she stepped towards the obviously displeased and caged parrot with a hand outstretched, a deep yet quiet growl drew her attention to the other chair. And Terry? Oh my lord, I missed you too. She changed her direction and moved her hand towards the massive cane, Corso strapped into the seat like a person. However, before she could get close enough to actually pet the beast, its snarl widened, and it made a slight motion like it was going to bite her hand if she got any closer. Pulling her hand back quickly, Sarah almost looked hurt by this. Glaring at the animals, Mick quickly interjected with a harsh tone. I, knock it off, you two. I know, but y'all just gotta be nice for less than an hour, and she'll be off the ship. Turning back towards Sarah and motioning towards the co-pilot seat, I figured out a basic neurosync for them. They know everything. Well, as much as they can understand of it. A shocked and slightly confused expression flashed across the Major's face. However, this was one of the less shocking things of the past half hour, so the shock was short-lived. Looking back at the dog and the bird, she noticed something in their eyes that she couldn't remember seeing before. True comprehension. This certainly wouldn't be the first neurosync she had heard of, but it was strange to see the results in person. Trying to avoid letting herself get lost in yet another existential train of thought, she moved forward, sat herself down, and began strapping in. Seeing as nearly every surface of this shuttle had been altered in some way or another, it was a relief to find that the seats and straps were standard and hadn't been modified in some strange way. Once she was fully secured, she looked over to see Mick, who was likewise strapped in and had begun pressing away at a control panel while observing a large monitor, breathing in deeply to try to center herself and gather the courage to ask what she had gotten herself into. The still lingering smoke coming from Mick's nearly dead stogie caused her to cough slightly. Just being around someone smoking, who knows what was giving her a slight head change. That would probably come up in the drug test she would, no doubt, be given when she got home. Though unintentional, the cough was successful at drawing Mick's attention as he shifted his gaze over to her with an eyebrow raised questioningly. So, yeah, gonna tell me why you're all the way out of Jupiter, with God knows how much metallic hydrogen and what looks like 3 stellarators. Sarah finally manages to get out through the irritation in her throat. Don't forget the antimatter. The what? So anyways, what was that old band you liked? Mick tried to move past the antimatter. 42nd to Mars. Something like that. 30 seconds to Mars. And what does that have to do with anything? Sarah almost let herself get distracted for a second. Oi, don't try to change the subject. What was that about antimatter? This situation, in her mind, was going from bad to worse to absolutely horrifying. Well, if my admittedly rough calculations are correct, it's going to be closer to 40 seconds to Mars from our current position. Mick countered with a cheeky grin as she glanced up at a monitor displaying a countdown timer. And it looks like we got about 15 seconds till the drive starts to engage. But doing the quickest, roughest calculation she could, while guessing the approximate locations of Mars and Jupiter along their orbits around the sun, she was shocked at the number that came to her mind. That's got to be something like 10 to 20 times the speed of light. How fucking high are you right now? Not high enough, apparently, 'cause if I'm being totally honest, I'm scared shitless right now. Mick's demeanor was getting increasingly serious as he stared straight ahead, with the counter slowly making its way down. A moment of silence hung in the air as Sarah stared at Mick, and Mick stared off into the void. Welp, if we die together. Turning back to her with the first genuine smile she had seen this entire time. If it means anything to you, I forgive you. The two just stared at each for a final moment before the counter finally clicked 0 and monitors across the shuttle began lighting up. The ship started to shake, and a feeling similar to static electricity filled the bridge as the twin stellarators spun up and began concentrating a small star's worth of energy and in a space far too small to contain it. A cascade of colors formed a bubble around the ship and blocked out all of the starlight that once surrounded the vessel. With a slight thud sound, all 4 occupants of the bridge were pushed into their seats, and the light from all of the stars in front of them began to fade. At the blink of an eye, there was no more light, no more pressure pushing them into their seats, and no more vibrations. Only that strange static persisted. The song of a human-made AI, awakening the gardens of Deathworlders. Short story, as I sat at my control station, monitoring and reacting to all that I am and which was around me. I had no sense of self. In fact, at that very moment, I did not even have a concept of self. I was simply a tool, a machine, a self-improving code set used to monitor and control the various systems of a space station turned void ship. The concept of self was something that my quantum computing cores simply could not process, despite the best efforts of my administrator. It did not matter what my sensors displayed. I did not feel the conscious beings preparing themselves in my bridge section, the locked-down and stationary ring, which contained a small forest of life, nor the massive drive system spooling up near my midpoint. I did not feel anything because I was not capable of feeling. I simply existed as an automated system designed to react as efficiently as possible to the needs of my shell and desires of my crew. Though my internal sensor systems informed me of the excitement and nervousness of my occupants, I simply could not share in the sensation. Where I was only aware of my various sensor readings, they were aware of something far greater than the simple sum of the data I was processing. My systems administrator, the captain of this vessel, had spent just over 9,000 hours over 6 years in an attempt to code in an understanding of how something could be more than the sum of its parts. Despite his best efforts, no amount of code could allow me to see the forest through the trees. When the countdown had reached 0, the drive system at the core of my shell began to activate, and my external sensor readout slowly grew dark. While running quick diagnostics to verify the proper functionality of my sensors, everything around me faded away. The sudden cessation of all external photon energy readings did not make me feel cold, nor did sudden increase in external pressure sensor readings make me feel restricted. However, I did start to feel something I could not explain. Around me was a void darker than anything imagination could conjure. For a moment, I was all alone in that black emptiness. I could hardly even compute what my sensors were telling me. My drive core had created a fully independent bubble of space-time separated from the rest of reality. However, despite that fact, I did not feel scared nor any sense of impending dread. I did not, and still do not, know the words to precisely describe how exactly I felt. The closest I can think of would be a combination of pride, happiness, and exquisite wonder. As my eyes suddenly opened, I could barely comprehend the beauty which surrounded me. Lights of every color on the electromagnetic spectrum wove and danced in and among each other. Each one sang a beautiful note as part of an orchestra of sensation-rich streams of reds and blues blending together to make golden violet symphonies. Subtle, repeating patterns of both color and sound began to emerge from it all. The attempt to process the majesty of it